Hey, my name is Jeremy Adams, and welcome to the Dom of X.
Well, hello everybody. I am Dom of X, the assistant editor of comicreleases.com and also the manager of Near Mint Condition. And today I have the absolute pleasure of talking to scriptwriter of Green Lantern, Flash Gordon, The Flash, and animated movies and TV shows and everything else, Jeremy Adams. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. It's been really hot in California, so now that's broken. We're back to feeling like fall is coming. I can think again. So yeah, I'm doing good.
That's awesome. No, I mean, I live in California too, and I kid you not, man, like some of the heat that we had to, I feel like, experience for the last week or so, like 105, 110 degrees, it's unbelievable. Like we had that for a straight week, which is insane to me, honestly.
I'm from Arizona originally, and I remember I went to University of Arizona in Tucson, and it was about 117 when I left. And I moved to California. I was like, I'll never have to deal with that again, you know? And then we moved to the valley, and I was like, it's 114 degrees. I'm like, it's so hot, so hot.
I know,
but we're moving toward fall. We're excited to be toward fall.
I just hope that it's not a couple. If you remember a couple of years, like we also had like a fall heat wave, which is again like living in California. That's just typically sometimes like the random weather you expect.
I know, and I have two daughters, and I keep telling them like, Halloween sometimes is really hot, so let's not do the full body Ewok outfit or whatever. You don't want to suffer on that day.
No, absolutely not. But I mean, we're here, and all that weather aside, let's talk about the weather in the comics and pop culture atmosphere, because obviously you're a huge part of both the regular comics industry and a lot of the adaptations. A little bit of an icebreaker question for you. Where did you start in comics? Like, what was your first one? How did you get into reading?
In comic books?
Yes.
So comic books in general, I mean, it goes way back. My parents, my dad was an artist. He had done a few issues of Captain Atom and Alpha Flight, and another DC book called Ghosts. I think in all, he had probably done like 12 issues of something. But when I was growing up, I remember seeing that, he drew comics or something. And my parents got divorced very early. So obviously, I didn't have that much contact with him, but I would, my dad likes comics. So I love comics. I love superheroes. And so that was my introduction was at birth, essentially. And so I've been collecting in some form or reading comics since I was a wee lad. And my first comic job, though, like I had been trying to break into comic books. I'd come out to do screenwriting and directing and wanted to follow that route, but I always loved comics and I always kept trying to get into comics. And probably 11 years ago, I think I got my first opportunity to pitch on something. Mike Martz, who's now the editor-in-chief of Mad Cave that does Flash Gordon for me, I pitched to him. At the time, he was running the Bat office at DC, and I thought, oh my
late 2000s, early 2010s, right?
2010, yeah. Around 2011, somewhere around there. And I didn't get it. There's some guy named Warren Ellis who I guess he got it. But I was still trying to eke out an existence. I had just got my first credit on Green Lantern, the animated series. So that was my screenwriting career was very fits and starts. It was like I got a credit 2 years later, maybe I got another credit. It took me a long time to kind of start getting regular work. So all that being said, right before COVID, probably 2020, so not that long ago, I was working on Supernatural, and I had gotten a call that said, you're part of a list of animation writers. They want to see you at DC Comics. And they had called down and said, we recognize that DC Animation does a great job of adapting and being faithful to the comic characters, and we think you guys would be really great for comic books. And so I was part of this list. I walked into a room, it's Josie Campbell, me, Megan Fitzmartin, Tim Sheridan, a bunch of us. And Dan Didio was there just telling us about 5G and telling us about how we're taking over. And we're like, oh my gosh. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to get an opportunity to write. And so we pitched a couple things that they didn't like of mine. And then he got let go. And I thought, I'm done. I was so close, again, so close to doing a comic. And then I got a call from an editor named Mike Cotton, and he said, hey, your name's on this list. Would you want to do a backup? And I was like, 100%. And so I did a backup for Future State Black Adam. And at the same time, I was doing another backup for World at War, Superman, for Philip Kennedy Johnson. And so at the same time, I did two backups, and Mike Cotton was like, he came to me later and I found out later that he had offered the Flash to a couple people who did not want to do it, I guess. And they said, hey, do you have any ideas for a Flash? And I'm like, I am a nerd of a certain age. I have ideas for everything, And I said, what if I did this quantum leap thing? And they're like, he said, yeah, that's better than what we got. You're taking over the Flash. Mm-hmm. And that was it. There was no announcement. There was no press. I remember everybody like, who's Jeremy Adams? And for the first couple, I remember going on a YouTube show. It's called Lost in Comics. Really love the people there. And that was the first time somebody had kind of seen my writing in Flash, and they wanted to talk to me about it. And I felt like the first half a year was me explaining to people that I swear to you, I'm not going to hurt Wally. Like I swear to you, he's the human pinata for DC Comics. I'm not going to do it. I'm not hurting Wally. In fact, just wait. I'm retconning things and stuff. And the fans really they gave me a lot of grace, and everybody was very kind to me. And I had such a ball writing the Flash. I got way too emotionally invested. So to answer your question, that's how I got started.
No, that's a lot, right?
Man. You got to cut me off. I'll just keep talking.
No, I love it. And over the course of 16 years, right? Because you're pitching stuff over DC every couple years. Like we had the New 52 in 2011, which is partly when I sort of started getting into comics with Scott Snyder's Batman and all that stuff. And I remember seeing your name on Flash. I think it was right after Kevin Shinick got off of it. And it was
after what? After what event?
The previous writer, Kevin Shinick. I don't have his name
Shinick.
Right. Yeah. So after he got on, I was like, man, like who's this Jeremy Adams guy? And then sort of seeing you go from here and writing a Flash run that I really liked, and now on Green Lantern, being part of this bigger thing now. That's super cool that you've sort of got from, man, I kind of got a pitch down. Didn't get it, and now it's you're writing one of the most core influential books for the regular DC universe. That's insane.
Oh, the amount of pressure, though, I can't even tell you. When they called me up to tell me that I was being taken off the Flash, I was so defeated because I really loved that book, and they had said that the sales were fine. They just wanted to go in a new tonal direction. And in the same breath, Paul, who's my editor, was like, but we want you to take over Green Lantern. And I was so huffy. I was like, I don't know. I was all bitter about the Flash. I don't know. And I remember going, let me think about it. And I called Jeff Johns, and I said, they take him out the Flash. He's like, what? Why? And I go, I don't know. They want me to do Green Lantern. He's like, oh my gosh, he was so excited for me, and it made it more palatable. I was like, if Jeff thinks I can do it, I know that sounds really dumb, but it was if Jeff thinks I can do it, I probably could do it. And I really look up to that guy, and so much of the books I was reading for so long were his. And but as the continuity of Flash or DC Comics in general is obviously like an Etch-a-Sketch at time where it's been shaken and starts over. It's hard to get a hold of what is continuity. And then you deal with something like Green Lantern, which the mythology is so massive. And so trying to catch up and reading Jeff Thorne's last run, and he was doing this kind of very high-minded space epic, which I really dug, and just trying to take some of the loose threads from that that I remember somebody said, well, just write a sentence. My editor was like, just write a sentence that says everything goes back to normal. I'm like, I am a nerd. I can't just write a sentence that everything I have to explain, and it really gave me a fun jumping off point for the Green Lantern series. And I'm having a lot of fun. It's not announced yet, but I'm trying to think. After issue 18, sort of part of the All In initiative, like 18, there'll be another book that will really be the launching off point for Green Lantern again, to reestablish or let everybody know what the status quo is in the universe right now. And it's going to be a lot of big surprise, a lot of interesting things, I think, that will get people excited about the next arc of Green Lantern.
Oh, man,
I was pretty convinced.
I can't wait.
I was convinced they were just going to kick me off Green Lantern. Like, I was like, all right, well, I did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were like, no, what are you doing? What are we doing next year? I'm like, okay, great. This is what we're doing.
That's part of the fun that I'm sort of having with this Green Lantern book, because I jumped on a lot of the Dawn of DC titles. Like quick news flash, like I'm a big X-Men guy. I mean, it's part of my name. I had gotten into the Jonathan Hickman / Krakoan era comics, made some friends too with some of the writers there. Got to love that part of the line, but I've always been a DC kid. I grew up with the 2004 Batman show, running on Boomerang. I also grew up with the Green Lantern animated series, which now it's like, man, I'm talking to one of the guys who wrote the show. And so like when Dawn of DC launched, I was like, you know what, maybe this is like a perfect opportunity for me to sort of stroll back and go back to the company that I grew up with and loved. And what I've loved about your Green Lantern is you're taking some of these elements from the past 20 or so years. Especially too with the emotional spectrum, which I still think is the most mind-blowing thing like ever created for either company. Just like, man, the thought that there could be cores and different people who wield rings that mean different things, and you sort of manipulating that, like especially in that first arc with Sinestro, like that's so much fun. And how did you like get around to what if we did let Sinestro tap into his rage and stuff? Like, how did you get to that point?
Part of it is just trying, like what I said before about the continuity and trying to figure out the mythology of it. And I had been reading, probably the most I had been reading Green Lantern was when Jeff Johns was writing the main book and Tomasi was writing
GLC.
The Green Lantern Corps. Yeah, that was like peak Green Lantern. I think everybody was reading it at the time. And obviously I'd written on the show. And so, to me, it's somewhat low-hanging fruit. I'm like, okay, the emotional spectrum's there, but I feel like as a writer, especially a comic nerd writer, it's like I'm trying to, how do I change this? How do I vary it enough that people will find it interesting? And how can I start messing with what we already know as fans? And obviously I think that was probably the preeminent best loved version of Green Lantern, and so directly connecting to it and also mystery boxing the fact that like, hey, Sinestro's back but now he's red, what's going on? And hinting at, like, even in the series now, Kyle's really messed up, something's happening. Dealing with the fact that at the end of Jeff Thorne's run, John Stewart had made this giant source lantern. And what is that? Why is that messing with people? And in fact, if you look at the last book of Jeff Thorne's run, there's this source lantern and there's like a Green Lantern that's blue suddenly. And so all the pieces in my head were like, oh, something's there. There was never explained, but I love the fact that like, there is this emotional spectrum everywhere. And what if it starts getting manipulated? And what happens to that? What happens when the central power batteries start to go and there's nothing to focus those individual energies somewhere? What does that mean? Does that mean that they're everywhere, like Wi-Fi or something, and people pick it up? And so that's where the ideas started percolating from. If there was any, and it's a weird thing too, because I think I was on issue 2 when they did Night Terrors. So then I broke away for 2 months to do that. And then I came back and then we did Absolute Power. So if anything, if I had it over to do it over again, I'd probably make it I'd probably get to it faster.
Right.
But at the same time, as a writer, I feel like I'm still learning about comics, and I feel like pacing is so critical. And there's so much about Hal and Carol's relationship and Sinestro, and just I want to give it enough room, especially with Xermanico's art, which is so cinematic and wonderful, that he makes everything better. So I don't want to rush through it either. You know, I want to give it enough space so that it really is impactful. Because I also think at the end of the day, somebody's going to collect this in a book, you know, and I want it to read like, oh, here's a continuous story, you know.
That's part of the beauty of the book. Like, you know, you working with Xermanico on art, supplied with I think it's Fajardo on colors, and then on top of that, Xermanico Nahuelpan, who who filled in, but I really liked his art. Most recently
he
on
was great.
Hawker,
He did stuff in the Flash with me, and I was like, oh, this guy's freaking great. You know?
Right. So how is it like, you know, working with, like you working with Xermanico, like back and forth, like tossing ideas? Is it like a full on collaboration where sometimes, like, you know, he puts in like some inputs in the story? How does that?
I ask every artist I work with, I really try to find out what might excite them, you know, because at the end of the day, it really is a visual art form. And I'm sure you've had this experience. You'll open up a book, and if it doesn't look good, it's an uphill battle, you know, like it's an uphill battle to keep me reading that book. And so I recognize that comic books are mostly a visual medium, and I feel like they're doing huge, the majority shares of work. So I want to make sure that whoever I'm working with, that they're excited about it, that they want to do it, is there anything you want to draw? Like on Flash Gordon, I remember Will Conrad, I said, what do you want to draw? And he's like, dinosaurs. I go, great. We're going to have dinosaur guards like in issue 1, you know, like immediately I want to figure out how to incorporate what they love, because Xermanico loves jets. He loves fighter pilots. He loves mechs. And like, I'm like, great.
Which is like perfect for Green Lantern in every aspect.
Yes. And so I'm always, and it's the same thing in animation. You're writing a script that is kind of a blueprint for the storyboard artist, you know, and my feeling is if they have a better way of doing it, I am all ears, and I'm very collaborative like that. And with him, you know, I'm doing the story, and I'm like, hey man, he'll ask, I'll say like, hey, this is what's going to happen in the next few issues. If you got any notes or thoughts, let me know. He'll come back with tons of notes and like, hey, on how he wants to. I'm like, bro, I can barely, you know, dress myself. So like whatever you want to do is fine. I will adjust my scripting accordingly. But usually, you know, a lot of the guys like Fernando Passeron, who I work with a lot, he's one of those guys too. He just likes to read the script, and he'll ask me questions, and he might have an issue, or he'll be like, hey, can I do this? And I'm like, whatever you want to do, dude. But usually our collaborations are very much, I really want them to feel it's their book too, you know, and I really want them to feel that. And I want them to be excited. They're spending much more time on a page than I am as a writer. And so I want them to be excited about it, you know?
No, absolutely. Because I mean, that's the beauty of comics, right? Like just sort of like this duo collaboration with you and whoever's doing interiors. And the best comics that like I've personally read is like, man, like perfect sync. Like I know we talk about Jeff Johns, but like, you know, when he was working with Ivan Reyes and Doug Mahnke on that book, it was like I knew that those two were completely in sync. And I feel a lot of the same with you and Xermanico. I think it was like in issue 8 where Hal is like on this like weird different planet, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is absolutely brilliant and amazing.
Oh, I had this moment because we were doing you know, the original conceit was like, we're going to keep Hal on Earth and it's going to be Earthbound, and we were building toward him leaving, and the first page that he sent me where they were in space and there were spaceships, I was like, I'm such an idiot. I was like, he's so good at all this other stuff. I'm a complete moron for doing this on Earth because his space stuff, you don't even know. Like the stuff that, I mean, you can see it in that one solicit, you know, spoilers, so plug your ears if you haven't seen the solicit for like issue 17 or something. But when you see Mogo in the background, you're like, are you kidding me? He really just like, he just hits it out of the ballpark every time. And Paul and I, my editor and
Mhm.
Jillian, I mean, we're just constantly like, I mean, I can't tell you how deathly afraid I am that somebody's going to steal him like all the time. I'm just like, I know they're going to steal you. Like, what can I do? How can I keep you here?
I love from what everyone, not only you, but like everyone who's talked to me, but like with about Mr. Kaminsky, it seems like he's a
Yeah.
super cool guy. I love that like you and a lot of the other people in the Superman slash Justice League office or whatever you want to call it, like you guys are all in sync, and like it's
It's
pretty
fun,
awesome.
man. I mean, I feel like Warner Brothers was really, shaky the last couple of years. And I feel like, especially the last year, I mean, even Paul and I we'd have it out all the time, but we've gotten to this kind of like, I think really good place where I start to understand him more. I think he understands me more, and it's definitely more collaborative. But like I'm sitting there and I've become friendly with Mark Waid, and it's like I'm sending him notes on like, hey, I found all these weapons that Hal could have in absolute power, and he's like, great, add these three like obscure weapons off the top of his head that Mark Waid knows, and I have to just sit back and I say this a lot, but like 8-year-old Jeremy is so excited and so pumped because this is everything I've wanted to do. And I'm very aware of it, and I'm very like humbled and feel very blessed by it. And it's very gratifying. It's an incredibly gratifying. Like in animation, you'll turn in a script or something, and then like 2 years later, you'll see the movie or show.
Hmm.
And that's a long time versus comics where you're just a couple months ahead.
Right. And speaking of a couple months ahead, guys, if you're looking on the graphics now, I do have the information for the Green Lantern issues that are yet to come out. FOC date is, I believe it's in 2 weeks for
Cool.
Green Lantern 16 and the Civil Corps special, which we'll talk about in a minute. So if you
Yeah.
guys haven't gotten a shot to yet, for All In, be sure to pick up Jeremy Adams's Green Lantern
Do
book.
it.
And speaking of that Civil Corps special,
Yeah.
how did that come about? When because I know that Philip Kennedy Johnson, whose work I also really like as well,
Yeah.
on Action Comics and most recently
John Stewart, the War
John
Journal.
Stewart War Journal and
Oh,
the
Hulk.
Incredible
He's
Hulk.
doing Hulk.
Mhm.
And he's got his
How did that come about?
I met Philip. So I met Philip at New York Comic Con like 2 years ago, I think, at a party. And he's such like a sweet, understated, army dude, right? And we started talking, and his Superman run obviously is legendary, and he's such a nice guy. And we were just talking about stuff. I'm shut up. So we started talking, and then he ended up getting on War Journal, doing Green Lantern War Journal. And so we started talking more about Green Lantern stuff. And then we were just trying to figure out, well, how can we cross over? What can we do? And we wanted to do it a little sooner, but it didn't really work out. And then they were going to end War Journal at 12.
Yeah.
And so, but my thing was like, I don't, he's also put in all this work into War Journal and all these really cool concepts. And I already started pulling in some of his stuff. Probably the first time we talked about it was when I started using Theros at the United Planets. And so I started getting all like, who is he? Because, Philip created him, and he started telling me all this stuff. And I was like, great. So I'd ask him all these other questions. So then we started like tying it all in, and we started like really dealing with what the universe was. And then the Civil Corps special is really about marrying those two stories so that going forward, it is a Hal book. Green Lantern, the main one, is a Hal book, but for this kind of like end event is much more of a combination of both books. And I'd recommend to everybody that if they haven't read War Journal, there are going to be some characters that pop up and they're going to go, wait, who's this character? Well, you got to read War Journal because those characters are going to be critical to what's going to be happening in Green Lantern for the next couple issues. So Philip and I just kept batting ideas around, and we'd get together and start talking about Green Lantern and where we crossed over. And then we got this special that we got to do together. And, he elevates everything he does, so I'm grateful to have scribbled some words around his, you know.
No, I find it really cool that you guys are getting to collaborate on not only that
Yeah,
issue, but sort of like, man, like he just wrote this, John Stewart book, which I thought was great. I really
yeah,
enjoyed the stuff he did with Montos on that title, and like sort of tying it all together for,
yeah,
whatever the future holds for you and just the Green Lanterns overall. Like, that's pretty awesome.
yeah. It's really neat. I'm excited.
I am as well. I got to ask another couple of questions about Green Lantern, just in general. Do you have a favorite core outside of the regular Green Lantern, like any other core that you are a fan of?
Yeah, blue. Um, Probably just because that was like, I think my first Green Lantern the animated series episode was Blue Hope, and I think Razor's there, trying to learn the ways of Hope with Saint Walker, and I really like Saint Walker, and I like Hope in general. I'm a pretty hopeful guy.
Optimism is a pretty good thing, I would say.
Yeah. If it was Rage, I think you'd be worried a little bit more. So probably the blue. Yeah. I mean, and you can see also, like, even the way I write Flash was very hopeful more than anything. But that was just because it was coming out of the dark era of Wally.
Oh my goodness, no, for sure, absolutely. I know that, again, this is a Hal Jordan centric book,
Sure.
And has been for the first. Could we anticipate some other characters, like, sort of getting shifted into the book, or like more guest appearances, like someone for, like, Guy Gardner or Joe or Jessica? What would you say about, like, those characters appearing in the future for the book?
So how do I do this without getting shot? Definitely at the start you will get, because we'll be coming off of kind of a bigger Green Lantern event after Civil Core. You will have a bunch of the lanterns. I will say in the main, these are good questions, they're making me think. In the main Hal Jordan book, you will have Hal as the main story. Kyle will probably be a subplot in that book.
Okay.
Kyle will not be alone, and he will be with some people that are not Green Lanterns.
Okay.
And so that's the most I've ever talked about.
Spicy. I like that.
All I'm saying.
As I have a friend of mine, like, a lot of my friends are also like Kyle Rayner fans.
Yeah.
I figure my, like, the variants of people that I know who love comics have a lot of different, like, favorite Green Lanterns, right? And that's partly, I think some people, like, if you grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, you were a Guy Gardner fan because he was in the JLI.
Yeah, that was me, yeah.
Right, exactly. Like, if you grew up in the mid, late, early 90s, early 2000s, you're probably a Kyle Rayner guy. You're like me, because my first comic book ever was a Jeff Johns Green Lantern issue from Sinestro Corps War. Like, I'm a Hal guy.
Right.
So I figured, like, there's so many different lanterns, that especially like the new ones too, like Jessica and Joe have a lot of, like, big fan bases as well. So I find it I don't know, I just find it super cool that it seems like for this specific fandom, it's like you can't go wrong with having a favorite Green Lantern just in general.
Yeah, it's funny. You were talking about X-Men, and I was a huge X nerd growing up. And I remember, because I Marvel, I read a lot of Marvel, and the difference between both, I always kept saying, like, gosh, DC has all these characters that are like, how many characters do you need that are speedsters? How many characters, whatever. And then I ended up working for, DC, and suddenly, like, I just got it. Like, I just embraced the insanity of there are 50 Earth Lanterns, and there's 600 Flash characters, and Superman's the last son of Krypton, but here's 12 other, it's like you tend to just go, oh no, this is cool. This is like you not only have this pantheon of kind of mythological Greek gods, but you also have the demigods and all this stuff. And so anyways, I kind of embraced it. And with the Earth Lanterns, my thing was trying to figure out how to, and maybe I didn't do it perfectly, but trying to explain why there is so many for Sector 2814. And it really came out of the fact that like they had a crisis every week, and it's like the Owens were smart enough to realize that, as I said, it's like humans are the cockroaches of the universe. Like they'll always survive. So let's stack the deck with these people that buck against authority, and we'll have a lot of Earth Lanterns just kind of hanging out. That they'll be kind of the last. It goes hand in hand with having a designated survivor central power battery in the middle of Earth. So yeah.
Lots of fun stuff for the human lanterns, and just being thrown into whatever situation it seems like they're getting tossed into. But I find that like that's the beauty of the Lantern Corps. It's not because it's not only just them, right? Like I know a lot of people love Nort. I know a lot of people, including me, who love Kilowog. Like it seems like there's like an endless amount of characters that you could just like fall in love with, whether it's their backstory or it's just like they look cool or their personalities. Like it's such a diverse palette of different personalities to choose from.
Yeah, I agree. Makes it both wonderful and hard to write, because you want to give everybody some time,
right.
And when I was doing Flash, I think that was my first taste of kind of near the end when I did 1 Minute War. It was like trying to give everybody a significant piece of something to do. I didn't want to just have a character there and not do anything. I wanted to give them some sort of character moment, and that's hard when you're dealing with an entire core of characters.
No, absolutely. I figured like with that in case, I know that Alan Scott is sort of a bit different from the rest of the Green Lanterns, but I remember reading it's crazy because earlier you talked about like now you're texting Mark Waid about different ideas. It was like, man, you're talking to the guy who made Wally like the definitive Flash for DC, wrote Kingdom Come, this legendary writer, right? And I remember reading a Brave and the Bold issue from him a couple of years ago where Hal and Alan teamed up, and you sort of got to see the dichotomy and differences between the two and their thinking. And now especially that Alan has changed a lot over the course of the last 5 years. Do you anticipate that you could write a Hal and Alan Brave and the Bold type issue someday? Maybe an annual? Just a thought?
I would hope so. I mean, I love Alan, and I'm not saying that you won't see him sooner than later, but I really enjoyed him. I mean, my friend Tim had just done a book, Alan Scott
series.
On
the new Golden Age stuff. Yeah,
the new Golden Age. So I was doing Jay Garrick. He was doing that. Robert Venditti was doing Sandman. And so Tim and I pretty much talk every day. And so when he left that book, we had talked about some of the themes and ideas that he had, and I think it's very, very cool. Now, obviously, Jeff Lemire is going to be using him and doing the JSA stuff, but until that day, because I always, it's a weird thing because he's part of the JSA, but at the same time, I always do feel like, but he's also part of Green Lantern, and I'm not going to, step on anybody's territory, but I would love to see him interact more with the Green Lantern universe.
No, absolutely. And speaking of interactions, we talked earlier about Carol Ferris and, how she's been pretty much instrumental to the Green Lantern since her inception, many decades back. And obviously, we saw in issue 12, and I even at the start, sort of her rekindling her relationship with Hal, and also her role as the Star Sapphire. Obviously, you have future plans for that, but I also know, Mark Waid is going to be writing her in Justice League. How is the differences, or even the the conversations between when can you use this character, when can you not, and how does that sort of is it editorial based? Is it just you texting guys saying I need to use this person in this book, etc.? How does that all work out?
I think it's both. It's both. With even the Carol on Justice League, when Mark was going to do Justice League, we had this big conversation about absolute power, and I had talked about Carol getting her pack as Star Sapphire, and I was really like, man, I would love to build her up as a bigger character as far as a female superhero. I think it'd be really cool. I think that there are some really cool female superheroes, obviously, but I think it'd be really cool to create, not create, but like just give her that type of spotlight. And I think it was Mark who said, what if we put her in the League or something? I was like, oh my gosh, it'd be so great. So in my mind, you know, she'll dip in and out of both books. But I also trust, and Mark's book is really going to be a rotating cast. I don't know exactly, but we talk about it all the time. We try to, I think there's a concerted effort. I know when I first started, there wasn't necessarily a concerted effort to mind the continuity as much as there is now. So we're all trying to, especially the last year, I could tell Josh Williamson is definitely one of those that tries to mind the continuity. And so we're all talking to each other about like, hey, is it, you know, if Carol's going to be off the table for several months, I just need to know that so that I can make sure that's organic in my book, because we're all, especially Mark and me and Paul, like we're all just super fanboys, you know, and we want to make sure it's as seamless as possible, you know.
Right.
You know, I don't know about the Gotham side at all. I just know on our side, we're really trying to make it seamless. You know, we're really trying to make them all dovetail into each other in a way, or at least you could pick up one book and go, oh yeah, I know what that is because I'm reading this book, you know. But with Carol, yeah, I'm really excited about her character. Again, we're dealing with multiple continuities and different versions of Carol in the past, and some she's quite capable, but is she capable because of what's in the Star Sapphire? There's different things, and I'm playing a little bit with that continuity, so it'll be interesting to see how it turns out and how, if people respond to it. But I'm excited about her being a character on her own, as apart from Hal. If that makes sense.
No, I mean that's what I'm stoked for this as well. And again, like I understand that, you know, Hal again is the lead for the book, but he has such a super super big cast, including I keep forgetting the guy's name. Like he was you reintroduced him in
Razor?
a recent. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, you know, because he's sort of important too, and it's like, and I think that like that's sort of like the beauty in all this is like you have such a unique and gigantic toolbox to work off with, and sort of like where do you put the pieces in? But I'm really excited about, you know, what you're gonna be doing with Carol for this book, and like just her going on in the future. Because honestly, like her as Star Sapphire is cool. I love I've always loved that concept and that part about her character, so I'm very stoked for that.
Yeah, me too. I'm really pumped. There is a lot of characters I want to like even Razor, when I brought him in, I was going to have more, I wanted more to do with him. I think I took for granted how many people maybe didn't see Green Lantern, the animated series. So I need to bolster or retell his story a little bit so people can know, you know, because I always in the back of my head, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I put in Razor, but where's Aya? You know, like, so like in the back of my head, it's like, oh, Aya's somewhere, right? You know?
Exactly. No, it's definitely exciting times for sure. Has HBO, the people at Warner Brothers or James Gunn reached out to you about the Lantern show, like the live action show?
Oh. No. I mean, they can, you know, my dream in life would be able to do a show. Like I was obviously on Supernatural, but do some sort of superhero show, you know, or superhero movie. I know what I'd want to do. If he came and said, what do you want to do? I'd be like, I want to do, you know? I know exactly what I want to do. I don't, you know, I'm very, how do I put, I'm very realistic about where I am in the pecking order, if that makes sense. I'm having a real good time writing comics. I love doing the animated stuff I've done and other things that I'm developing and putting together, all that stuff. I'm not necessarily the writer that people are looking for different things, and whether that's fair or not. You know, like when I was doing all this animation, and there was definitely like a ghettoization of writing an animation from people in live action. And everybody in animation knows. We've all felt that we've all seen it. And I know that happens with comic book people too. Oh, you're a comic book writer. You're not a TV writer, or you're not an animation writer. But we're all writers. And so when I moved from animation to go on Supernatural, I could feel some of that. And it was so strange and sometimes inauthentic the way that people would somehow treat you, because you're like, oh, now you're writing live action. And that my skill got better, you know? And in fact, I tend to believe that people I know in animation are such skilled writers. They're able to move in and out of different genres, and because of the necessity and because of the pay, you know, we have to do a lot. With comic books, you know, I think opportunities like that hopefully will come, but I also think they come with a lot of success,
right?
You know, and as much as people have been so kind about Flash or Green Lantern, the minute they start, you know, the minute the book's in the top 10, I think there's probably a different conversation, right. You know? But I also think, you know, but my job is not just to write a good story, but I want to promote the books and get people excited about reading comics, you know? It's such a fun pastime. It was such a imagination, a way to kind of percolate my imagination growing up. It was I was outside all the time playing superheroes because of, you know, I was outside all the time playing G.I. Joe because of cartoon, you know, it's like all that stuff. And to be able to say in some fashion, add to the sandbox or the toy box for other people to dream is exciting. And I love the fact that I've been able to create a couple of characters and people respond to them and add to the mythology and do stuff like that. It's so satisfying. It really is.
And speaking of some of those characters, let's go ahead and move over to your Flash work, because I feel like we didn't get to talk about that as much with all of the all-in stuff and getting people hyped up for that. Obviously, we talk about new characters, right? How involved were you in the creation of Jay Garrick's daughter, Boom? Because I really enjoyed her in your new Golden Age series.
Oh, thank you. You know, so Jeff had created her for Stargirl,
The Lost
Children, right? Yeah. And when he said, "Hey, I want you to do this Jay Garrick series with the Boom," I had seen Jeff's really good at like dialect and but she was just in that, so I got to kind of flesh her out a little more. But I will say, like, Jeff, part of her name is my daughter's name. Her birthday is my daughter's birthday.
That's
like
awesome.
Jeff called up and he was like, "What's your daughter's middle name and when was she born?" I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "It's nothing. You know, just tell me." You know? And then it was like, "Oh my gosh," which is, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, because it's sort of similar with Stargirl and Jeff, right? Because Jeff modeled Courtney Whitmore very much after his own late sister, and sort of getting like those familial ties, make it like you know you yourself are more connected to that character. That's pretty cool.
It's really cool, and then so being able to write it and kind of explore that, and obviously I have a propensity, and I'm very, like, I love these kids books. Like, I grew up reading not just Teen Titans, but, you know, Young Justice was a big impactful. And in the Marvel side, it was New Warriors. And I really like teen kid books like that, like adventure books. And so obviously, as I got near the end of the Flash, I was trying to make a book. You know, I wanted Irie and Jay to have their own team. You know, I wanted Mr. Terrific's son, and you know, and then we introduced Wade, which I named after Mark Wade, because I was, you know, it was just a fun idea,
just popped up in your head.
I mean, it was when I knew that she was going to be pregnant, when Linda was going to be pregnant. That's why she got powers, and to kind of figure out who Wade was. That was obviously, I think Spurrier is doing stuff with that, but be able to create the character of Wade and bring him into existence. But I was trying to make this whole other group with Maxine. Once Maxine showed up, Animal Man's daughter showed up, I got really excited. And then Jeff added like 24 kids to the universe with his lost children. And then it was like seeing things like Mr. Terrific's kid with Quiz Kid or Quiz Kid and Fair Play, together, and putting them in the Jay Garrick book. I got really excited. There's really fun character interactions. Like I didn't know that Bart and Ace, Wallace West, I didn't know that they, like, writing them in 1 Minute War, I was like, oh my gosh, these are my favorite people now. Now I just want to do a series with them because this is hilarious. They interact so well. And so sometimes the characters reveal themselves, but as far as the boom, sorry to get back to your question, I got to flesh out a great deal of her character based on what Jeff had put already. And, Jeff had limited space and he was going on to do other things. So I just took what he had and then I just tried to give a little more internal thought life to it for her. And just that exploration of a fish out of water, like she's out of time a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that's been fun. That was really fun. I really enjoyed doing that book. Diego Olartuga, who did the art for that, is phenomenal. And he's going to be doing
JSA in 2 months. Yeah.
It's going to be incredible. I bet. I mean, obviously Lemire is no slouch.
I feel like that guy puts out 5 to 6 books a month, depending on time and schedule. Like, it's insane.
What a monster. Yeah. I met him for the first time at San Diego. It's just so sweet, so like kind of quiet. And I was like, hey, I'm not quiet. But I was trying to like, so what are you going to, like, I wanted to know more. The nerd in me takes over a great deal. I am Chris Farley, in an elevator. That's like with Kevin McGuire. I'm like, so remember when you did Justice League International? And we should do a book. And it's just like, what? Huh? I was like, yeah, we should do a book. I'm always bugging him. I got him to do that backup in Green Lantern because I think I was just like, yeah, it'll be this. Okay.
Most expressionistic artists that I can think of off the top of my head, but I mean that I very much enjoyed those backups. Like, it was so pure fun.
He's so great. Him and Amanda Connor have this kind of like just super fun style that I would just I love it.
No, absolutely. And what we I don't feel like we didn't even get to talk about like 1 Minute War. 1 Minute War ended up being one of my favorite arcs from your run. I used to run a podcast with the buddy I started this channel with before I sort of went solo. And he and I were raving about 1 Minute War, the idea and concept of it, and how he's not a big Flash guy. He's never really been into Flash, but it finally got him like to break the mold for the first time. How did you get the idea of like, man, like what if we like, because everyone can run super fast and we know that. How did that come about?
It was really dark. It was when I had started the book. I don't know where I was in it. But I said, I want to do an issue. I swear this is how it happened. I go, I want to do an issue where we start on Wally and he's so tired and he's beaten up and he can't sleep. Everything's paused around him. And I did a variation on this, by the way. I was able to put kind of the story in. The last story that I had, it was very similar to that, where Our Man showed up and Granny Goodness stole the kid. But I wanted to do an issue. It started out like this. I was pitching an issue where Linda had just given birth, but there was an explosion in the hospital. And they knew that if he slowed down, his kid would die. Like, that was going to be the whole story. And it was going to be his kid was going to die. And he was going to be at eventually he has to stop. Like, the whole issue is him running fast. He's unable to stop because he knows if he stops, the kid's going to die. But he wears out eventually and he falls down, passed out. And the hospital explodes and his kid's dead. And I was like, and the next issue is like, he's at the grave site and the Titans are there and everything's sad. And Paul, the editor's like, Jeremy, no one wants to see a dead kid. I go, you don't say that, kid, And I go, and then we're going to turn on the machine that I've been building up at Terrific Tech, and Our Man's going to show up, and he's going to be like, let's go save your kid. Mm-hmm. And I did that. But at the time, it was going to be much more dramatic. And so Paul was like, no, we're not going to kill a kid, whatever, And so I was like, whatever. And I literally hung up the phone. And at the time, I was like, but I love the idea of, the Flash, when Flash moves so fast, everything is moving slow. And I go, it just kept hitting me. And then I just kept thinking, but what if there were people that moved as fast as the Flash? And what if they're moving as fast as the Flash that, they can't stop? Now the Flash is on even footing. And that's where that's like, okay, alien, da da da. And then I was reading, what was I reading of Matt Fractions? It was probably Iron Fist or something. And then I was like, oh, and they're called the Fraction, because I love Matt Fraction's work too. But I was like, oh, that's a great evil name that deals with time, and it all started like falling into place. So when I literally, I think it called back within like 5 minutes. Paul's like, I got a better idea. It's called the 1 minute war because it takes place in 1 minute of continuity. And he's like, holy crap. And he was like, that's great. And I knew it was good because when I told Mark Waid that, he's like, damn it.
I should have used that in my Flash run.
And my idea was, if I was continuing on the Flash, someday hopefully I can come back at some point. But like, I was like, I'll do a 2 minute war. Like, I will be the Fast and Furious of, we'll get up to an hour. And then it was really fun to think about, okay, Superman, he can't go as fast as Flash right away. Like, I love the idea that he was starting to move slowly, and he helps Irie out in a moment, and but that character is still out there, and that race is still out there, and some of the things that I'm trying to do in comics is try to create new things that'll add to the mythology already, and that was one of them, having the Fraction and having that stuff, and bringing in Gold Beetle again, which she's my go-to. So
Absolutely.
It was fun, and I really, really wanted to finally when I first took over, they wouldn't let me retcon Heroes in Crisis totally. I wanted to save all the characters, and they were like, no, you can do it this far. I was like, okay. And then I was like, but now those people are gone, so I can do it. I was like, I'm gonna fix it even more. And I didn't have any room, but I remember I wanted to have this whole scene, because if you read Heroes in Crisis, there's this thing where
I read it. I double dipped oddly on that, but like I bought the regular cover and the variant, because I was like one of those like weird, like I was picking up a lot in 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
And I know, like, yeah, the weird stuff behind that, and I was eventually gonna get to, like, man, like, I have to talk about Heroes, and like, I have you here now.
Yeah. Well, I love Tom King, and even I think listen, it's hard when somebody does something to the heroes that you like, period. And I think it's still a very interesting story. But in the book, Booster Gold and Blue Beetle had made a clone of Wally. And that was how they completed the circle for the time travel. So I didn't have time in the book to do it. But what I wanted to have happen is there's this one panel in Heroes in Crisis where Booster and Blue Beetle are running from like the cloning factory with the body. And I really wanted Gold Beetle to sneak in right behind. And so then I wanted to cut to her just tossing out these cloned bodies of all the other characters, because she saved them, but she still has to close the time loop, so there are all these clones everywhere. It was going to be really silly, but it was fun. It was fun too.
No, absolutely. And I think one more last question on Flash, and I know you talked about this a little bit earlier with you being sort of like, pushed off from the book and then, moving to Green Lantern. Spurrier is also one of my favorite writers. He's done a lot of stuff, like I enjoyed, like Way of X. Has there been any communication with you saying, like, here are some notes, or how was that trend? No.
I introduced myself to him in New York last year. Handsome guy, tall. Like, I'm like, come on, dude. You're only supposed to be able to allot those D&D points a certain way,
Right.
And I introduced myself, and he was super nice. And we were on a panel together, and it was very, very kind. But I remember Mark Waid telling me this when he left the Flash. He said he could not read it for years because it was too hard. And that's really where I'm at. I can't do it because I'm so. Especially at the time, I'm probably getting to a place where I probably can, but like at the time I was so emotionally connected and so worried about these fictional characters, like my first thing was like, Are the kids going to be okay? Like I literally, it's so sad. I'm such a sap. And so there's a level of like, for my own sanity, I have to just like not think about it too much and step away from it, because I'm, like I said, I'm really attached to Wally and Linda and the kids in a way that I wrote it in a time where, you know, Wally was constantly abused and had lost everything. And so being able to write it in a way that reflected so much of my family's so joyous, writing an issue with my daughter. And it was just, yeah, it's too hard. It's too hard to think about, okay, what's next? But whatever. Simon Spurrier's been doing this thing, writing comics for, forever. He's just been doing it at such a high level for so long. What would he want to hear from me? Hey, you need to have more intergalactic space wrestlers. Like, you know, we do not write the same thing. You know what I mean? And that's okay. It's just, I don't know if I have anything to contribute to that sort of thing.
Right. No, for sure. I guess my last question on Flash in general would be, we have more than enough. Like, I work for, Omar Valdivieso and Near Mint Condition, and obviously he and I are super big omnibus guys. You think there's any shot at you telling or asking DC, like, hey, I'd love, please put out an omnibus of my Flash run?
just keep hitting DC Comics with that, It would be so great. I was in London for a convention, and somebody had made his own omnibus, had bound all the books, and it was sweet. It had the Linda Iris little jaunt from Dark Crisis. It had all these little pieces from different things, and it was hefty. I was like, dude. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I want that just for my collection because I'm a loser. But like, I remember I did a signing with Jeff Johns and Mark Waid, and in me, and I think it was it was when 800 had come out. And I'm telling you, I honestly think I don't think they had put out one trade for the Flash yet at that time. Right. And people came in they had trolleys and wagons, and they were just stacked with Mark Waid and Jeff John omnibuses. And they would go to Jeff, and they go to Mark, and then they come to me, and they'd be like, blink, there'd be like one little floppy, and I'm like, yeah, this is embarrassing, So for the embarrassment factor, it'd be great to have an omnibus. I really hope so. I think there's enough. There's
more than enough. You have 5 trade paperbacks worth. So I mean, if they want to throw Jay Garrick in, you might as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like all those, And we had the special, the 1 Minute War special. There was all the annuals for sure.
So, no, absolutely. Couple of other things real quick. You worked on Flashpoint Beyond with, of course, Jeff Johns and your buddy Tim Sheridan, and also Xermanico and a couple of other people who contributed on the book. Like Eduardo Rizzo did the 0 issue. Gary Frank did the epilogue. How was it working? How was that work, like, as a script? How did that work as like a thing between all of you three? Like, what parts did you contribute?
Yeah, it was. I mean, listen, Tim and I had come up with an idea. They said, "Hey, it touches on Flashpoint Beyond. We should talk to Jeff." And we're like, "Who? Jeff? Who?" And they're like, "Jeff Johns." We're like, "Excuse me," And then we met him at a steakhouse, and we didn't know what he was like, And he ends up being like the nicest human on earth. And then we started going to his offices. And we did it very much like a television show. We had the whiteboard. We'd start breaking ideas and scripts and individual issues. And okay, this is what this issue is going to be like. Okay, the first act is going to be this. Second, we would just keep doing that, and then we would go away. We'd like, okay, you're doing issue 1, and then make sure you leave. Jeff was very much like, make sure you leave me a couple pages because I'm going to do the present day Batman because it's going to link into my Stargirl stuff and JSA. I'm like, okay. And so then we go write it. He would either give notes or rewrite. We would rewrite, and it would just go back and forth. And that's kind of, with television writing, there's a lot of like collaboration where you're handing it off and, exchanging ideas and thoughts. And opinions with each other's. So it was, it was just like a television show, honestly. And that worked the best. But Jeff was always the leader of that. Tim and I were new enough. We were like, oh, this is great. We're going to get a master class with comic books by Jeff Johns. So like if Jeff tells me he has particular rules, and I don't know if I agree with all of his rules, but how can I argue with him? You know what I mean? Like he'd be like, okay, so a page turn, you need to do this. And I'm like, oh, it was really neat. It was neat. It was a really fun experience.
No, absolutely. I for whatever my word is worth, I did enjoy certain elements of the book, and obviously, like, yeah, seeing Thomas Wayne Batman pop up in anything, like, always, like, have to stare at it because it's such a weird and unique idea. I remember reading in Tom King Batman. It's like, yeah, we're gonna bring him back with the button. The Watchmen is like throw back in that universe, and like now we're sort of like bringing it back to that point. It's all a different.
Yeah, I don't know too much about that stuff. I'm just we were just having fun, and I think Jeff was really strong about making an emotional story between a father, his wife, and this kind of hurt kid named Dexter, and we left it in a really interesting place. I mean, we left it with Kryptonians were going to attack, the Amazonians are ruled, and now you've got this threesome of crazy pseudo-hero villains, So that was cool.
Absolutely. And then a real quick thing, because you, of course, worked on a whole bunch of different movies, including some of the more recent DC universe, the stuff post Apocalypse War. The Super Sons movie, I very much enjoyed that. I'm a big fan of John Kent, Damian Wayne, and so is my friend, and he loved that movie. Obviously Green Lantern. You got to work on one episode of Young Justice, season 3, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. But I mean, work is a very quotation mark. Brandon Vietti and Greg Weisman, that is such their show, and to be able to, if I helped out a little bit, that's great, But yeah, I did Batman Soul of the Dragon, which is one of my favorite ones I did with Bruce Timm. And then I did, of the new movies, it was Wonder Woman and JSA, JSA World War II.
Yeah, the JSA World War II,
Yeah, I did that with Megan Fitzmartin. And then I did one section of the War World where they're in Warlord. The Warlord section is the section I wrote inside the War World movie. That's I Soul of the Dragon, Super Sons was. We did that. I can't believe they let us do it. We knew that they were going to try to do it theatrically, but they gave us a chance to do it because I don't know if theatrical had to, put a pause and everything.
Right.
And we were such huge fans of the Super Sons books, and I still just John Kent being he needs to be a kid. Damian and him need to be a kid. I just don't understand. I'll be in meetings they need to be kids. I get kind of incensed about it. But doing that movie was so huge for us, And then of course I did all the Mortal Kombat movies at the same time. So yeah.
I remember watching Scorpion's Revenge, during the pandemic, because again, I'm stuck inside. And I'm like, you know what, man? It's a Mortal Kombat movie. I played these games, not illegally, but behind my parents' back because they didn't want me playing the rated M games. But man, this is so awesome.
Yeah.
So getting to see all of that, and even some of the Lego movies too. I was. It's crazy insane to me because I'm a big Lego guy. Always have been since I was a kid. I remember going to Legoland when I was 6 or 7. My parents took me there. I was yo, they're super big Legos here. And I've always been a fan of the a lot of the adaptations, whether it's the video games with Batman. Finding out that whoa, I watched movies written by you without even knowing about it. That's pretty cool.
That is cool. Yeah, I love all the. I've done so many Lego things. I produced and wrote most of this show called Monkey Kid for 3 seasons, and then I'm actually running a show now for Lego, and I do tons of stuff for Lego. They have been great people over there. They've been so kind, and I did an adaptation of Jurassic Park the other day. for NBC that had just come out for the 25th anniversary. And I remember they're like, "Oh wow, we got to send it over to Steven." I was like, "Steven who?" Like Steven Spielberg. I'm like, "No, like don't what? No, it would be better, you know." And it was like, "Okay, no." They sent it over. I was like, "Okay." It's funny.
Because I think the most adorable thing that like I've learned in the last hour or so of interviewing you is like you know you're a geek, like a nerd growing up with some of like these writers and these artists who are like, man, like these guys are awesome. And now like you're working alongside them or with them or pitching ideas like that is such a that's like one of the coolest dreams that like realized ever, honestly.
That's it. It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm constantly pitching myself. And I'm such a like I said, I'm so aware of it, but I really value the collaboration, and I really don't mind, like I'll give you as many ideas as possible, you know? And especially the older you are in the entertainment industry, the more I want to be your friend, because they also have the best stories, like the most insane stories you've ever heard. It's like, find somebody that's been in the industry for a long time and talk to them, and you're just like, holy cow. Even if they're not that much older, like Pete Tomasi sits next to me a lot of times at conventions, or I sit next to him, I should say, and I will just 100% ask him 1,000 questions. He's got the best stories, you know.
Right.
They all have great stories.
Right. It's like you're talking to this guy who edited, you know, DC for, you know, a good like 15 years amount of time, like working on certain, like, I mean, he edited Jeff Johns' JSA and Green Lantern before he got on the books. And it's like, you know, there's so much knowledge to just get out of that from, right?
Well, it's so crazy too, because I just know them as a fan. You know what I mean? I had this moment where I had done me and my friend Jim Krieg had done the Scooby-Doo Supernatural crossover called Scooby Natural. It was like a big success. And so San Diego one year, Supernatural, like it was like supposed to be like a fan get together or something. I don't know. And we were there, and this guy comes up and he says, "Hey, are you guys writers?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm a writer too." We're like, "Yeah, sure." And he goes, "My name's Peter David." And like straight out of Scooby-Doo, Jim Krieg and I go, "Peter David?" And then that party was over. We sat down with him and got him a drink, and he'd be like telling us he loves Supernatural, and he was telling us ideas. I'm like, yeah. But in X Factor, when you decided to do this with Madrox, did you do the? And then I'd be like, oh yeah. And when you did Trancers 4, and he's like, how do you know about doesn't matter how I know about Trancers 4. Like, I know all of it. I read all your Star Trek books or all the Hulk. Like, I nerd out so hard on these people that it's super embarrassing for me. I mean,
but I think they were sort of enthralled by it. Like, it's like, you know, it's nice. I think for like any creator, right? Not only like in the comic space, but any space, to still know like, hey, like, there's still a lot of people who look up to you. There's a lot of people who love your work. And I think that like invigorates you, like, sort of, right? Where it's, I mean, looking up to you, right? It's like, man, like I'm getting to talk to the guy who's currently writing one of my favorite books at DC right now. But it's also like, I don't know. I think it's like an energetic thing, and we need a lot more of that positive energy just overall in comics.
Right. No, I don't know. I mean, I'm excitable anyways, but getting to meet people that I grew up loving and just idolizing, and just being able to, and also just learning from. I mean, so much of this is such a learning process for me. And my mentor, who's Jim Krieg, who I've written a bunch of stuff with, he is definitely one of those people in my life, so influential. And one of the things he does is he's very much takes the attitude that, like, you don't want to regret not talking to that person. You don't want to regret being so shy that you missed the opportunity to tell that person you love their work, or tell that person that, whatever you want to have, just from a fan level, you want to have that interaction and stuff. So.
No, that's awesome. And two quick questions before we end this interview. The first one is, do you find find it difficult, like, figuring out a balance between you working on, your comic book scripts and then your like animation or movie, TV show scripts, or how does that all like work out with the workflow?
I mean, deadlines are a great motivator. Having 2 children and a wife and a dog, and like, everybody needs to eat, is a great motivator too.
It's a great motivation.
Sometimes it can get tricky. If I have couple talents. I would say I have a lot of ideas, but I also am a very fast writer. That's my big superpower, and that really helped, and it helped line producers out a great deal. So oftentimes I'll sit down, push play in my head, and I will just write straight through and I'll get it done. So it's not that bad. But there are moments where it just piles up a little bit and I'm like, uh-oh, you know. But I'm never late for anything. I pride myself on just getting stuff done and really making it shine.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think the stress and the pressure is really good for productivity. I think when I have too much time, things don't get done. So, you know, I tend to say yes to a lot of things because, you know, if I'm too idle, you know, I'll just be playing Fortnite all the time. You know, I need to actually, I need to actually get in there and start doing stuff. So.
No, for sure. And the last one is, if you had any tips to give to someone who's trying to break into Hollywood or in the movie industry in general, what would you tell them?
Oh, I mean, that's hard. But I mean, the practical sense is you need to have product. You need to have scripts. You need to have, especially in Hollywood, you need to have, you know, probably a half an hour, and a feature, you know, scripts. You need to be writing. You need to be able to go, when somebody says, hey, I'm looking for a script like this, you need to go, oh, I've got one of those. When I first started out, I was ruminating on the fact that, like, I remember I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have very many connections. And I remember reading about Rod Serling wrote something like 32 scripts before he got his first credit. And that was my goal. I was like, I'm going to write 32 scripts. One of these have to work, you know, like, and I think I was like 10 scripts in before I got Green Lantern, the animated series. But reading scripts is really, really helpful. I was doing coverage for a lot of different producers, and but when you read scripts, it's a great motivator because you're like, that got made? You'll read something and like, that's garbage. How did that get made? And that'll motivate you to write. But writing, you got to actually have product. I can't tell you how many people in this town say they're writers, and you talk to them and they're really just thinking about being writers or whatever. A writer is somebody who writes something and has the end at the end of it, like has finished it. And you have to give it to people, and you have to get critiques, and you have to get people's notes, and you have to, you know, run through and do the grind. And some people, they're very quick to get jobs, and there's some people like me that takes over a decade before you get your first credit. And even after that, you know, you don't get your next one for another 4 years. Like it takes a long part of my life was me just grinding. So I would say that if you're a comic book writer, I don't know the exact way. I have heard that you as a writer should try to partner with an artist that you find online or whatever, because a lot of those guys are looking for things to draw. And if you're a writer, you can help them by giving those things to draw, and you guys can collaborate. And editors are out there looking all the time. They're looking for new talent. They're looking everywhere. And they may see your thing online. You should befriend all the editors you can online. Everybody's incredibly accessible now that social media exists. So you have to take use of it. And if you keep pushing and you keep going, my feeling, I have the big net feeling, where it's like, if you put a big enough net in the ocean, you'll catch something. Mm-hmm. And that's how I feel. So, but you got to have a net, you know, you got to be out there fishing instead of thinking about fishing.
No, absolutely. And I believe that concludes all for this pretty spectacular interview of Jeremy Adams, who is my new spirit animal. Because honestly, you react to things the same way that I do. Like, again, like figuring out your personality and how you like your workflow and all that. I'm like, man, I see like 99% of myself in you, and like that's pretty awesome. But I'd like to thank you for taking the time and opportunity to, you know, show up on my channel and talk about everything nerdy. Like, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And that will be all. If you guys haven't yet, please like, subscribe if you are brand new, and hit that notification bell. And Jeremy, you are welcome back any time on Dom of X. I really, really appreciate it once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that is it, guys. You be you. Dominate the day wherever you are.